The first voicemail came at 6:12 a.m. 8 missed calls, all from my mother. The ninth was different. It was my sister's voice, shaking, breathless, urgent. "Please, just call me back. It's about Dad. It's serious." I hadn't spoken to them in 3 years. And suddenly, the silence I fought so hard to build around my life shattered before sunrise. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal. And if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button, because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I used to believe family meant loyalty, that blood meant protection, that love meant sacrifice. I was wrong. Growing up in a small industrial town outside Manchester, we didn't have much, but we had expectations. My parents worked hard, but their dreams weren't for themselves. They were for my sister, Chloe. Chloe was the golden child, the talented one, the gifted one. From the time she could walk, everyone said she was destined for something big. Dance competitions, private lessons, overseas workshops, custom costumes. Every spare pound in our house went toward her future. And me? I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need much. I worked part-time at 16, paid for my own school trips, bought my own laptop for university applications. No one asked me to. They just assumed I would. And I did, because that's what good daughters do. They don't complain, they adjust, they make room. When I got accepted into a business program in London, I cried in the kitchen. Not because I was proud, because I knew I couldn't go. Dad sat at the table, staring at the letter like it was a bill. "Might be better to stay local," he said. "Your sister's audition season is coming up. We'll need the extra money." He didn't say it directly, but we all understood. I deferred my offer. Chloe flew to Berlin that summer for an international showcase. I stayed home and picked up extra shifts. Years passed. Chloe didn't become famous. She didn't become a star. She became average. But by then, my parents had invested too much to admit it. So when I landed a remote marketing job with a London firm at 24, earning more money than anyone in my family ever had, that's when everything changed. At first, they were proud. "Oh, our daughter works with international clients," they told the neighbors. They bragged at church. But pride slowly turned into expectation, then obligation, then pressure. It started with small asks. "Could you help with Chloe's new audition tape? It's just a few hundred." Then, "She needs updated headshots. You know how competitive it is." Then, "This might be her last big chance." And finally, the call that split my life in two. We were sitting in the living room. Chloe was pacing. There was a dance academy in Los Angeles, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Tuition, £38,000. Living expenses not included. My parents looked at me like I was the solution. "We've given everything for this family," Mom said quietly. "Now it's your turn." I laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. But no one else was laughing. "You make more than all of us," Dad added. "It's just money." Just money? The money I saved by sacrificing university. The money I earned working late nights. The money I used to finally build something for myself. They wanted me to fund her dream. Again. I remember Chloe's face. Not embarrassed, not hesitant, entitled. "You don't even have kids," she said. "What else are you spending it on?" I felt something inside me snap. Years of swallowed resentment. Years of quiet compliance. "I'm not paying for this," I said. Silence. The air thick, heavy. "You're selfish," Mom whispered. Selfish. The word echoed in the room like a verdict. I was selfish for wanting my own life. Selfish for keeping my own earnings. Selfish for not financing someone else's ambition. I stood up. And for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize. "I'm done," I said. And I walked out. I moved to Berlin within 2 months. New city, new apartment, new number. I blocked their calls.
all of them. I built a new routine. Morning runs along the spree, late-night strategy calls with US clients, weekend markets, friends who didn't know my history. For the first time, my money was mine. My choices were mine. My future was mine. And the silence from home? It felt like peace. Until the voicemails. 8 missed calls. And that 9th message. Please, just call me back. It's about Dad. It's serious. My hands were shaking as I replayed it. Because here's the thing about leaving. You can change cities. You can change numbers. But you can't erase blood. And deep down, I knew, if something had happened to him, I would never forgive myself. But what I didn't know was that those 8 urgent calls weren't about illness. They weren't about tragedy. They were about something far worse.
3 years of silence. 3 years of birthdays I didn't attend. 3 Christmases where I watched snowfall in Berlin instead of sitting stiffly on that worn brown sofa in Manchester, pretending everything was fine. And now, 8 voicemails. I didn't call back right away. Instead, I made coffee. I sat by the window. I stared at my phone like it might explode. I told myself I was stronger now. Independent, detached. But independence doesn't cancel history. It just buries it under productivity and therapy bills. I pressed play on the first voicemail. Mum's voice. Tight, controlled. Call us back, it's important. No warmth. No, I miss you. Just urgency. The second. Dad this time. Short, gruff. Pick up. The third. Chloe. You can't just ignore this. Her tone already edged with accusation. By the 5th voicemail, I realized something. No one sounded scared. No one sounded devastated. They sounded irritated. And that's when my stomach dropped. The 9th message, the one that shook, was different. Chloe again, but this time she was crying. Dad's business. It's bad. We need to talk, please. Dad's business. My father ran a small printing company. Nothing glamorous, but stable, predictable, safe. Or so I thought. I stared at the wall as memories rearranged themselves in my head. When I left town, they didn't just lose a daughter. They lost a wallet. Had they been depending on me more than I knew? I didn't sleep that night. At 2:47 a.m. Berlin time, I called back. Mom answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Finally, she exhaled. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We were worried." Finally. "What's going on?" I asked. There was shuffling, a whisper. Then Dad's voice came on the line. "The business is in trouble." "How?" "Orders dropped. Suppliers raised costs. It snowballed." I closed my eyes. And a pause, long enough to feel rehearsed. "We took out a loan." "Of course they did." "How much?" Silence again. Then, 75,000. The number landed like a physical blow. "What?" "We thought Chloe would be settled in LA by now," Mom cut in quickly. "Her visa was nearly approved. She had connections. It was going to pay off." My heart pounded. "You took out a loan. Based on that?" "You said no," Chloe snapped in the background, "so we had to figure something out." There it was. The truth cracking through. This wasn't about Dad's health. It wasn't about tragedy. It was about debt. And somehow, it was still about me. "You expected her career to cover 75,000 pounds?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Dad sighed. "You don't understand how these things work." "No, I understood perfectly. They gambled, and they lost. And what does this have to do with me?" I said, though I already knew. Mom's voice softened. "We're family." I almost laughed. 3 years of silence. And now, family.
"The bank's restructuring the loan," Dad said quickly. "If we don't make a substantial payment in 30 days, we could lose the house." The house. The one I grew up in. The kitchen where I cried over that London acceptance letter. The living room where I was called selfish. A strange wave of guilt rose in my chest. They were still my parents. Still human. Still flawed. But 75,000. After everything. "I can't just transfer that kind of money," I said slowly. "You can," Chloe shot back. "You make 6 figures now. I've seen your company's website." I froze. "How do you know what I make?" "You think we don't Google you," she said. That unsettled me more than the debt. They had been watching, tracking, researching. Well, I thought I was forgotten. "Listen," Mom said carefully, switching tactics. "We're not asking for all of it, just enough to show good faith. 40,000 would help. 40,000. Almost exactly what they once asked for LA. My chest tightened. "Do you hear yourselves?" I whispered. "You owe this family," Dad said. "Owe." The word hit harder than selfish ever had. I owed them. For what? For raising me. For sidelining me. For treating me like an investment return. I stood up from the kitchen table in my Berlin flat and began pacing. "You made your choices," I said. "Without me. We made them because you abandoned us," Chloe shouted. Abandoned. I moved away. I set boundaries. And somehow that became abandonment. "I left because you only valued me when I paid," I said quietly. Silence on the line. The kind that means truth landed. "We valued you," Mom insisted. "When?" I asked. "Before or after my salary?" No answer. Dad cleared his throat. "If we lose the house, that's on you." There it was. The ultimatum. The emotional weapon. My breathing slowed. I felt something different this time. Not rage. Not hurt. Clarity. I didn't take out that loan. We did it for the family. We did it for Chloe's dream. Chloe gasped. "I worked for that dream." "With whose money?" I asked. Silence again. Heavy. Suffocating. 30 days, Dad said finally. "That's what we have. And if I say no," Mom's voice broke, "then we'll know exactly how much we mean to you." The call ended there. No goodbye. No love you. Just pressure. I stood in my quiet apartment long after the line went dead. Berlin traffic hummed below. A tram rattled past. Life was moving, but mine felt suspended between 2 versions of myself. The obedient daughter, and the woman I fought to become. I went to my laptop, opened my banking app. The number in my savings account stared back at me. Technically, I could pay it. Not comfortably, not without sacrificing investments, but I could. The question wasn't can I, it was should I. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had been labeled selfish for choosing themselves. So many strangers telling the same story. Different countries, same script. The responsible sibling, the golden child, the emotional blackmail. I wasn't alone. And yet, the weight still felt personal. Because if they lost the house, would I ever stop wondering if I could have prevented it? But if I paid, would it ever stop? At 11:08 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text from Chloe. "If you don't help, I'm selling your old things. My old things." "What does that mean?" I typed back. A photo came through. My childhood room. The shelves cleared. Boxes stacked. And then, another photo. The one thing I thought they would never touch. Grandma's antique jewelry box. The one she left to me. The one Mom said would always be safe. My chest tightened. "Don't," I wrote. Chloe's reply came instantly. "Then prove you care." My pulse roared in my ears. They weren't just asking. They were escalating. Weaponizing memories. Weaponizing inheritance. Weaponizing guilt. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about survival. It was about control. But what I didn't know yet was that Chloe had already made another move, one that would drag my name into something far messier than family debt. And when I found out, there would be no coming back.
I didn't respond to Chloe's last message, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Every time I reacted, they escalated. Every time I defended myself, they reframed me as the villain. If I sent money, I would confirm their story. She left, but she still belongs to us. If I refused, I would confirm the other one. She's selfish, cold, ungrateful. Either way, they won, unless I changed the game. That afternoon, I called the bank. Not mine, theirs. It took an hour of transfers and formal requests, but eventually I reached someone willing to confirm at least the existence of the loan. Yes, there is an active restructuring request, the woman said carefully, but I can't disclose details unless you're listed on the account. I'm not, I said. I just need to know, has anyone else's name been attached as a guarantor? There was a pause, a click of keys. Then, there appears to be an informal reference to a secondary income source in the application notes. My heart slowed. What secondary income source? I can't share specifics, but is it a person? Another pause. Yes. My stomach dropped. Is that person aware they're referenced? Silence. Then carefully, I would recommend they review any documents they may have signed. Signed? I hadn't signed anything. Not in 3 years. My fingers went cold. I ended the call and immediately searched my email. Nothing from their bank, no digital forms, no contracts. Then I checked something I hadn't thought about in ages, my old UK address. I had left mail forwarding active for a year after moving to Berlin. After that, I assumed everything stopped. Unless they still had access to my old documents, my old signature, old paperwork. I opened my secure document folder. Passport copy, university deferment forms, old tax records, scanned signatures, high resolution, easily copied. No, they wouldn't. Would they? My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Chloe. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had tagged me in a post. I opened it and my blood turned to ice. A fundraiser, public, titled Help Save a Family Business Betrayed by Their Own Daughter. My name wasn't directly written in the headline, but inside the description, it was very clear. She moved abroad, built her wealth, and refuses to help the parents who sacrificed everything for her. There were comments, dozens already. Disgusting. Kids these days are heartless. Hope she sees this. I scrolled down. Chloe had posted it with a crying selfie. Caption, sometimes the people you love hurt you the most. My vision blurred. She hadn't just called. She hadn't just threatened. She had gone public. I felt exposed, not because strangers were judging me, but because the narrative was being rewritten without my voice, and they were winning. The post had already been shared 42 times. Local friends from our town were commenting, old teachers, neighbors, church members, people who watched me grow up, reading a version of me that wasn't true. I closed the app, then opened it again, because I needed to see how far it had gone. One comment stopped me cold. Didn't she co-sign the loan? Co-sign? My chest tightened. Another comment, I heard her name's on the paperwork, so technically she's responsible. Responsible? I called my lawyer. I hadn't needed one before, but living abroad, managing contracts, and earning at my level meant I already had legal contacts. When I explained the situation, there was a long silence. Did you sign anything in the past 5 years related to your parents? No. Did you ever give them power of attorney? No. Did you ever share copies of your signature digitally? Yes, but years ago. Send me everything, he said, immediately. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. I kept replaying the bank woman's words. Review any documents they may have signed. They may have signed. Not I. They. A memory surfaced. 3 years ago, a week before I left town, Dad asked me to sign a temporary guarantor form for a small equipment upgrade at the printing shop. It's just paperwork, he said, won't even be used. I remember hesitating, but he looked tired, stressed. I signed it. It was only 5,000 pounds back then. That was it. That was the crack. If they expanded that credit line, if they refinanced, if they rolled it into something larger, was my name still attached? At midnight, my lawyer called back. I found something. My breath caught. The original guarantor agreement you signed wasn't for 5,000 pounds. What? It was open-ended. What does that mean? It means you agreed to guarantee future liabilities related to that account unless formally revoked. I sat down hard on my kitchen floor. How much liability? In theory? He paused. Unlimited. The room spun. They couldn't, I whispered. They did. The 75,000-pound loan wasn't just theirs. On paper, it might legally involve me. Without my knowledge, without my consent to the new amount, but legally, messy. Can they enforce it? I asked. They can try, especially if payments default. And if they lose the house, creditors will look for other recovery paths, which meant me. I finally understood the fundraiser, the public shaming, the urgency. It wasn't just guilt, it was leverage. If I paid voluntarily, no legal fight. If I refused, they could argue I was responsible, and the social pressure would paint me as cruel if I defended myself. They had boxed me in, brilliantly, cruelly. At 3:12 a.m., another message from Chloe arrived. You're trending in town. Attached was a screenshot from a local Facebook group. My full name, my job, speculation about my income, and a poll. Should she help? Yes, 78%. No, 22%. I felt sick. This wasn't just family drama anymore. It was public humiliation, strategic, calculated, and dangerous for my career. I typed one message to Chloe. If you don't remove that fundraiser by morning, I will respond publicly. She replied instantly. Go ahead, let everyone see who you really are. I stared at the screen because for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being called selfish. I was afraid of what I might have to reveal. The documents, the guarantor clause, the manipulation. If I went public, there would be no privacy left for any of us, and I wasn't sure I was ready to burn it all down. But what I didn't know yet was that someone else had already reached out, not from my family, not from town, but from Los Angeles, and that message would change everything.
The email came at 7:03 a.m. Berlin time, from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, regarding Chloe's fundraiser, urgent. I hesitated. I almost deleted it. But something in the tone, urgent, formal, precise, made me open it. The message was short. Miss Shaheen, we represent a private investor who has been contacted by your sister regarding her LA plans. She has cited you as a financial backer. Please contact us immediately if any misrepresentation has been made. Failure to respond could lead to legal consequences in California. Sincerely, M.S. Law Associates. My hands shook. I reread it 3 times. Legal consequences, California, misrepresentation. My mind raced. Chloe had spun the fundraiser into something bigger than just the UK. Somehow she'd convinced, or at least involved, investors in LA, people who had no idea what the truth was, and no, my name was in the crosshairs. I called my lawyer again. He answered on the first ring, groggy. I have bad news, I said. I already know, he said. Send me the email. Within 20 minutes, he had responded, "Miss Shaheen, you are potentially implicated in a civil claim if any funds are solicited under the assumption that you will pay. You need to act quickly to document your non-involvement and set boundaries. This involves official letters, proof of independent residency, and statements regarding the original guarantor document limitations." I exhaled, feeling the walls of my apartment close in. I had built a life of independence, structure, and safety, and in one weekend, it was all collapsing around me. I needed to understand Chloe's strategy. She had gone public. She had leveraged social media. She had contacted investors, and she had used my past signature to manipulate the situation. This wasn't naive desperation. This was calculated. And worse, it was working. By mid-morning, the fundraiser had doubled, 2,400 pounds in a few hours. Comments now weren't just sympathetic. They were aggressive. Shame on her. She needs to learn responsibility. Family comes first. And through it all, Chloe's replies were measured, public-facing. Sometimes the people you love hurt you most. I realized something. This wasn't about debt. It was about power. I decided I needed intelligence before action. I booked a one-way flight to London that afternoon. I told no one. Not my friends, not colleagues. I packed a small bag and left Berlin by sunset. On the train, I stared at the map. Manchester. 3 years of absence. 3 years of silence. Now I was returning, not as the obedient daughter, not as the scapegoat, but as someone who would reclaim control. And I knew instinctively that Chloe wouldn't see it coming. When I arrived in Manchester the next morning, the city looked the same. Same gray skies, same brick streets. But for me, everything had changed. I walked past the high street where we used to shop, the bakery where Mum bought my favorite cinnamon buns, the park where Chloe learned to ride a bike. I felt memories tug at me. Old resentment, old guilt, old love, all tangled together. I swallowed hard. And then I went to the first place that mattered, Dad's office. The printing company had shrunk in the 3 years I'd been gone. Half the staff were gone, orders were fewer, equipment looked older. Dad was there, hunched over his desk, looking smaller than I remembered. "Hello," I said softly. He looked up. Recognition flickered, then resignation. "You came back," he said. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked one question. "The loan?" Dad froze. Nothing has changed," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "The account? Did you include my name?" His eyes widened. We didn't think you'd ever come back." I let the words hang, because I already knew. That afternoon, I walked through the house I grew up in. Empty rooms, boxes stacked. My old bedroom was gone. Everything that reminded me of childhood and trust had been moved, sold, or threatened. I took a deep breath. This was war, and my opponents knew every weakness. I returned to Dad's office that evening with my laptop. I pulled up documents, bank statements, emails, scanned letters. I started organizing evidence, proof of my independent income, proof that I had no knowledge or agreement to the increased loan, proof that I had been blocked from decisions, from oversight, from consent. Every detail mattered. Every fact was a weapon, and I would use them all. That night, Chloe texted me. "Why are you here?" I replied calmly, "To settle this." Her next message was immediate. "Settle or destroy?" I didn't answer, because I didn't yet know, and that was the advantage. In the following days, the situation escalated. Local newspapers caught wind of the fundraiser. They ran stories. Social media went viral. Friends from school tagged me. "I can't believe she's letting this happen. She owes her family." I began to see the full scope of the plan. It wasn't just guilt. It was a full-scale public campaign. Chloe had learned every tactic from years of observation, from Mum's whispered instructions, from Dad's subtle manipulations. She had learned to weaponize narrative, and I had underestimated her. On the 5th day in Manchester, I received a phone call. From Los Angeles, the private investor. "Miss Shaheen?" "Yes," I said. "This is urgent. Your sister has misrepresented financial backing. We need confirmation that you are not involved." I realized the gravity. This wasn't just local gossip anymore. This could affect me internationally. My career, my reputation, my future. And Chloe had dragged me into it. That night, I sought a loan in my childhood bedroom, now empty, stripped of comfort, and drafted my response. Careful, precise, legal proof. No emotion. No guilt. Just facts. I attached proof of independent income, a clear statement of non-involvement, copies of the original £5,000 guarantor agreement, and sent it. Immediately. After sending, I exhaled. Finally, something tangible. Finally, something I controlled. But I didn't celebrate, because I knew this was far from over. Chloe would respond. She would escalate. She would fight. And now knowing her, she would not hold back. She had learned how to push every button. And I had learned that the daughter who left town had underestimated the daughter who stayed behind. That's when I got the message that changed everything. It wasn't from Chloe. It wasn't from my parents. It was from someone in LA, someone who had been watching the fundraiser quietly, someone with influence. And their words made me realize the war was just beginning.
The message arrived just after midnight. No name, no number, just an email address with a professional domain. Subject line, opportunity to resolve without public fallout. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally, but something told me not to ignore it. The email read, Miss Blank, we are a private legal consultancy in Los Angeles. We have been monitoring the Chloe Blank fundraiser and related communications. It appears there is a risk of misrepresentation of financial backing involving your name. Our client wishes to resolve this matter quietly, avoiding court, media, or public scrutiny. Please respond if you are willing to discuss terms of resolution. Time is critical. LA Legal Advisory. I reread it 3 times. Quietly. Without court. Without media. Avoiding public scrutiny. My mind raced. Was this a trap? Was it real? And if it was real, what leverage did they think I had? My career, my reputation, my future in international business? And the truth, I had none of it connected to Chloe's plans. I called my lawyer immediately. He answered, groggy but alert. They want to negotiate, I said. Yes, he said, and they're probably serious. This is a clean channel to prevent escalation, but you have to act carefully. Any statement could be used against you. Should I respond? Yes, but only under guidance. Don't admit liability, only clarify non-involvement, and request written confirmation from them before any fund or commitment is considered. I nodded. My chest was tight, my hands shaking, but I had clarity. I drafted a reply. Professional, cold, precise. No emotion, no guilt, no involvement, no authorization. Will provide documentation, open to discussion. Sent. The next morning, my phone rang. California. A deep voice, professional, measured. Miss Blank, this is Jonathan Pierce from LA Legal Advisory. We have reviewed your submission and the supporting documents. We understand your position. Our client wishes to avoid litigation or social media escalation. We can resolve this if your family ceases all public representation of you as a backer for Chloe's projects. We are willing to facilitate communication with your sister directly on neutral ground. My heart pounded. Neutral ground. A face-to-face. Not over phone, not over email. And yet part of me hesitated. Chloe had weaponized every tool at her disposal. Social media, public sympathy, local press. Meeting her in person could be dangerous. Or it could be the turning point. I spent the day preparing. Mental scripts, legal notes, potential responses, counter-arguments. I even rehearsed potential scenarios in front of the mirror. The girl who left town 3 years ago, hesitant, obedient, was gone. She had been replaced by someone meticulous, strategic, unwilling to be manipulated again. By evening, my lawyer confirmed travel arrangements. Los Angeles, neutral venue, private office, mediator present. I booked a flight. Every detail felt surreal. I was flying halfway across the world, not to visit family, not to celebrate life, but to confront 3 years of manipulation, guilt, and betrayal. On the plane, I couldn't sleep. Images of Chloe's posts, the fundraiser, the local media, and now this investor legal team kept flashing in my mind. Questions spun in circles. Would she apologize? Would she escalate? Would she try to pull me back into guilt again? And most importantly, could I walk out without being used again? When I landed in Los Angeles, I felt an unfamiliar weight. The city sprawled endlessly, warm lights against a clear sky. I thought about Chloe, about my parents, about everything I had sacrificed, and I realized something. No one could manipulate me anymore. Not Chloe, not my parents, not even the emotional weight of my own history. This meeting wasn't just about money. It wasn't about legal responsibility. It was about reclaiming my life. The next morning, I entered the neutral office. Mediator waiting. Chloe already there, looking composed. Not a trace of the frantic girl who posted selfies crying online. She smiled politely. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. We sat across from each other. Silence. The mediator spoke first, outlining the rules. No accusations, no raising voices. Focus on facts. Documentation will guide the conversation. Chloe spoke first. I didn't think it would get this big, she said, voice even. I nodded. I understand. And I want to make it clear. I am not financially responsible for your projects.
I never agreed to this funding beyond what was documented years ago. She tilted her head. I know, but it looked like you could help. I thought maybe you would. I let it hang. No rebuttal. Just calm. For hours, we went through everything. The original loan, the 5,000-pound document, my independent accounts, bank confirmations, legal correspondence, screenshots of social media posts. I stayed calm, precise, and unwavering. Chloe tried to push, subtly. Emotional appeals, guilt trips, passive-aggressive remarks. I deflected, focused on facts, controlled the narrative. And slowly, she began to crumble. By the end of the day, we had a resolution. Chloe agreed to remove all public fundraisers referencing me. She would issue a statement clarifying my non-involvement. The investor would confirm no legal claims against me. No money exchanged, no coercion succeeded. I walked out of the office feeling lighter than I had in years. But the war wasn't over. My family was still a mess. The emotional scars, the manipulation, the public shaming, they would linger. And I realized something. I had finally drawn the line. The obedient daughter, the wallet, the scapegoat, all of that was gone. I was finally me. And as I stepped out into the Los Angeles sunset, I understood the truth. You cannot control others. You cannot prevent betrayal. But you can reclaim your narrative. You can protect yourself. And you can finally walk away with your dignity intact.
Los Angeles was a revelation. The air was warm, electric. Palm trees lined streets that were wide and endless. The city felt alive, pulsing with opportunity. For 3 years, I had lived in Berlin, hiding from my past, building my career, avoiding confrontation. But standing here, on this new coast, in this new city, I realized the confrontation wasn't over yet. Because Chloe wasn't the only one I had to face. That night, alone in a small rented apartment, I reviewed every conversation, every email, every document. The fundraiser was gone. The social media posts were removed. The investors acknowledged my non-involvement. Technically, legally, I was safe. But emotionally, I wasn't. The betrayal ran deeper than money. It ran through childhood memories, through the countless times I had deferred my life for theirs, through the years of subtle manipulation that I had ignored, thinking it was love or family duty. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. And I realized, even though I had survived the legal and public battle, the real confrontation was internal. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a career mentor I had met in Berlin. I needed perspective, someone outside the chaos, someone who could see me, not the drama. She listened quietly as I recounted the past 3 years, the loan, the betrayal, the public shaming, the investor, the confrontation in LA. When I finished, she said, "You have to understand something. You are not the villain in this story. You are not the selfish one. You did what was necessary to survive. You set boundaries. That's strength, not weakness." Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. I hadn't realized how much I had internalized the guilt, the labels, the accusations. Over the next few days, I began taking control of my narrative publicly, but carefully. I drafted a video for my YouTube channel. Not to expose Chloe, not to shame my family, but to share my experience honestly, rawly. To tell the story from my perspective. I wanted people to understand what it feels like to be manipulated, shamed, and labeled for simply protecting yourself. I wanted them to know, it's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries. Filming was cathartic. I spoke directly into the camera. I didn't dramatize. I didn't embellish. I told the truth. About the London offer I deferred. About the 38,000-pound audition that wasn't mine to fund. About the moment I was called selfish for saying no. About the fundraiser. The LA emails, the confrontation. As I spoke, I felt a weight lift. The shame I had carried for years began to crack. I realized that the labels my family had imposed on me weren't real. They were a reflection of their expectations, not my character. I paused in the middle of filming. I thought about Chloe, about my parents. Would they ever understand? Would they ever acknowledge the harm they caused? Perhaps not. But I could no longer let their judgment define me. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. The people who manipulate you are dangerous, but the guilt you carry for them is optional. You can release it. You can reclaim your life. Once the video was uploaded, I watched the comments roll in. Messages from strangers who had lived similar experiences. I left my family to protect myself too. I was labeled selfish for setting boundaries. You're not alone. Reading them, I felt a strange connection. Across countries, across lives, across stories, the experience was shared. And in that connection, I found strength.
But as the days went on, Chloe didn't reach out. Not with apologies, not with reconciliation. Instead, I received a single email from her. "I guess we're done then, for now." I stared at it for a long time. The tone was ambiguous. Defeated, proud, calculated. I realized I didn't need to know. What mattered was that the line had been drawn. I spent the next week reflecting. I walked the streets of LA, visited the beach, watched the sunset over the Pacific Ocean. I thought about the person I was before Berlin, the person who deferred dreams, who swallowed resentment, who sacrificed herself to meet everyone else's expectations. And I thought about who I had become, the woman who stood up, who faced manipulation, who navigated international legal threats and public shaming, who finally reclaimed her life. The difference was stark. I felt something I hadn't in years, power. Not over them, not over the situation, but over myself. The last night in LA, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not Chloe, not my parents, not anyone connected to the fundraiser. It was a friend from Berlin. "You've changed," she wrote. "I can feel it even from here." I smiled, because she was right. I had changed. I had survived the manipulation, the betrayal, the public shame, and I had emerged stronger. Stronger not because I had fought them alone, but because I had finally refused to let them define me. The plane back to Berlin would leave in the morning. I packed lightly. No regrets, no guilt, no shame. Only lessons, and a story I could finally tell. A story of betrayal, of manipulation, of emotional warfare, and most importantly, of survival. As I closed my suitcase, I thought about the future. Would I ever reconcile fully with my family? Perhaps not. Would I ever forgive Chloe? Perhaps someday. But I had already forgiven myself, and that, I realized, was enough. I looked out the window one last time. The city lights glimmered, the ocean whispered, and the horizon stretched endlessly. For the first time in my life, I felt unshackled, unbound, free, and I knew without a doubt that I would never again let anyone else control my story.
The flight back to Berlin was restless. My mind kept replaying every detail of the Los Angeles confrontation, every calculated move Chloe had made, every manipulation, every public post, every legal threat. I felt simultaneously relieved and exhausted. Relieved because I had protected myself legally, emotionally, and professionally, and exhausted because I realized the fight wasn't over, not truly. Because family doesn't just forgive you when you've drawn the line. Family escalates. Family waits. When I landed in Berlin, my apartment felt different. The air seemed heavier, the city quieter, almost expectant, like it knew something had shifted in me. I unpacked quickly, tossing my suitcase onto the floor, and sat down at my laptop. My YouTube channel was still active. The video I had uploaded in LA was already gaining traction. Comments were pouring in. Strangers, viewers, people from across Europe and even the US, all sharing their own stories of betrayal, manipulation, and family conflict. And then I saw it, a private message. It was from Chloe. "You think this ends here? You can't erase everything. People will always see you as selfish." I paused. My heart raced. She was threatening my reputation again, not with funds or legal claims, but with narrative, public perception, the one thing that could touch my career if mishandled. I typed carefully. "I've already clarified the truth. You have the power to stop escalating, or you can continue. I won't respond to threats." No reply came, at first. But by midnight, my phone rang. An unknown number from Manchester. I hesitated. I hadn't expected any calls from home, not after LA. "Hello?" I said cautiously. A familiar voice, low and urgent. My mother. "Mariam, it's happening. You need to come back. Now." I froze. "Happening? What do you mean?" "It's Chloe. She's gone too far. She's dragged us all into something dangerous. The fundraiser. There's a new development. You have to see it yourself." I could hear the panic under her calm tone, the forced composure. Something had escalated beyond social media and legal threats. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. By the next morning, I was on a flight to Manchester again, heart pounding, mind racing. When I arrived, Dad met me at the airport. His usual stoicism was gone. Lines of stress and fear etched his face. "They've frozen the bank account," he said immediately.
eyes darting nervously. The fundraiser went too far, and now investors are threatening legal action. They claim you were misrepresented. Chloe, she's in over her head. I swallowed hard. I had predicted escalation, but this was catastrophic. We drove straight to the house. The front door was ajar. My old home, the place I had left years ago, the place where I had first been called selfish, the place where every memory of obedience and sacrifice lingered. Inside, chaos. Papers strewn across the kitchen table, letters from lawyers, emails printed and pinned to corkboards. The sense of panic was palpable. And Chloe, she was there, eyes wide, frantic. She wasn't composed anymore. The calm, calculated version of her had collapsed. Mariam, it's all gone wrong. I didn't mean. I just thought if I forced your hand, we could fix everything. Force my hand, I repeated, my voice steady but low. Chloe, you dragged everyone into legal threats, public shame, and financial chaos. You weaponized my name. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Her gaze faltered. Tears formed in her eyes, but not the ones she posted online for sympathy. These were raw, scared, human tears. I thought it was the only way, she whispered. I didn't think it would get this bad. I felt a mix of fury and sorrow. Fury because of the manipulation, the escalation, the near disaster. Sorrow because beneath it all, this was my sister, the girl I had grown up with, the one I had sacrificed for. We spent hours in the living room, documents spread across the table, lawyers on speakerphone from Berlin, LA, and Manchester. Emails were read aloud, bank statements scrutinized, legal documents clarified. Chloe's plan had been meticulous, too meticulous. She had copied signatures, manipulated language, and orchestrated public pressure. But one thing she hadn't accounted for: me. I had documented everything, every transaction, every correspondence, every boundary I had ever set. And now, for the first time, she saw the consequences of crossing me. It was late evening when the mediator suggested a solution. Chloe, you need to acknowledge the truth publicly and cease all representation of your sister as financially responsible. Any further escalation will result in formal litigation. Miss Mariam, you have the right to protect your career and legal standing, but reconciliation is optional. Chloe nodded slowly. She was pale, exhausted, defeated. I leaned back in my chair. This was the climax, the point where the tension broke. The emotional and legal storm had peaked. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift. Not just the legal risk, but the manipulation, the guilt, the obligation. But as we prepared to leave the room, Chloe said quietly, "Do you forgive me?" I looked at her, at my parents, who had sat silently, guilt and fear written across their faces. I realized forgiveness wasn't about absolution. It wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about freeing myself. "Yes," I said softly, "I forgive you, but that doesn't mean I forget, and it doesn't mean I'll let this happen again." Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I saw humility and fear, not the entitled calculation I remembered. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Confrontation is never just about the other person. It's about reclaiming your own power. The drive back to Berlin was quiet. The sky was streaked with orange and pink. I thought about the journey. 3 years of silence, distance, self-preservation, legal threats, public humiliation, and finally, confrontation. I thought about the person I had been, the obedient daughter, the scapegoat, the one who silently bore guilt. And I thought about the woman I had become, the one who faced manipulation, asserted boundaries, protected her life, and reclaimed her narrative. The weight of betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. That night, alone in my Berlin apartment, I reflected on what I had learned. Boundaries are essential. Protecting yourself is not selfish. Documentation and clarity are your best defense against manipulation. Family dynamics can be weaponized, but you can reclaim power. Forgiveness is for yourself, not for those who wronged you. Strength isn't just surviving, it's standing up, calmly and strategically, when everything is at stake. I opened my laptop and drafted my next video for my YouTube channel. This one would cover the climax, the confrontation, the manipulation, the legal and emotional battle. I wanted to show people that even when betrayal feels absolute, you can emerge intact, stronger, and empowered. As I prepared to film,
A message popped up on my phone. Chloe, thank you for standing your ground. I see now what I didn't understand. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I smiled, because I knew something she didn't yet realize. The story wasn't hers to control anymore. It was mine, and for the first time in my life, I felt the raw, unshakable clarity of truth. The storm had passed, the climax had been reached, and now it was time to conclude the story.
The weeks that followed the Los Angeles confrontation were quiet but intense. Quiet in that there were no more fundraisers, no social media posts, no panicked phone calls in the middle of the night. Intense because the emotional residue lingered, heavier than I expected. 3 years of silent resentment, 3 years of being called selfish, 3 years of sacrifice and guilt, those threads didn't unravel overnight. I spent my mornings running along the Berlin Spree, my afternoons sorting work, and my evenings reflecting. I realized that survival wasn't enough anymore. I needed closure, not from Chloe, not from my parents, not from anyone else, but from myself. I started by writing a letter, not to send, not to share, just for me. Dear Miriam, you did it. You stood up. You faced the storm. You defended your life, your career, your integrity. You protected your boundaries. You didn't give in to manipulation, guilt, or fear. You didn't just survive. You conquered the narrative. You are not selfish. You are brave. You are allowed to live your life on your own terms. And when I read it back, I cried. For the first time in years, I let myself feel the full weight of liberation. I uploaded a new video to my channel, carefully titled, designed, and framed for maximum impact. It began with a calm, intimate voice. Read aloud in a warm, reflective tone. Insert gentle pauses after major emotional reveals. I shared my story from the beginning, the deferred London acceptance, the family's obsession with Chloe's dreams, the financial requests, the word selfish branded across my chest, the 3 years of distance, the fundraiser, the Los Angeles confrontation. But I framed it differently, not as a tale of betrayal alone, not as a cautionary story, but as a guide for anyone who had ever been trapped by expectations, manipulation, or guilt. The response was immediate. Comments flooded in from all over the world. Strangers shared stories of being labeled selfish for choosing themselves, stories of manipulated careers, emotional blackmail, and family pressure. And slowly, I realized the most powerful part of my story wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't the legal battles. It wasn't even the climax with Chloe. It was the lesson I had learned. Survival isn't enough. True strength is reclaiming your narrative, asserting your boundaries, and refusing to let others define your value. One evening, my phone rang again. Chloe. I hesitated, then answered. I watched your latest video, she said quietly. I understand now. I was wrong. I see how far I went. Her voice sounded vulnerable, human, not the calculated girl who manipulated social media or investors. I forgive you, I said softly. But this isn't about forgiveness. It's about accountability, about learning and growing and not repeating the same mistakes. There was a pause. Do you think we can have a relationship again? She asked. I sighed. That will take time and boundaries. But yes, we can try, if we respect each other. For the first time in years, there was a sense of hope, not naive, not forced, but real. I thought about my parents next. The ones who called me selfish, who subtly weaponized guilt, who had invested everything in Chloe's future while neglecting mine. I knew they were human, flawed, desperate, perhaps scared themselves. But I also knew the line I had drawn couldn't be crossed again. I sent them a message. I am no longer the wallet. I am no longer silent. I am still your daughter, but I live my life my way. I hope you can accept that. No immediate reply, but I didn't need one. The clarity, the boundary, the empowerment, they were mine. I spent the following weeks reconnecting with myself. Berlin's skyline became a symbol of new beginnings. My mornings were mine. My savings were mine. My choices were mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt unshackled, free from guilt, manipulation, and expectation, free from being labeled selfish for wanting my own life. I realized something profound. The word selfish had been used as a weapon, but choosing yourself, your dreams,
your boundaries, your safety, is never selfish. It's survival. It's courage. It's the beginning of real life. Months later, Chloe and I began rebuilding our relationship, not as it was, but as it should be. We spoke openly, honestly. We acknowledged the past. We set rules, boundaries, limitations. No manipulation, no coercion, no weaponizing of emotions. And slowly, trust began to grow. I could forgive, but I would never forget. And that was okay, because survival isn't just living through betrayal. Survival is reclaiming yourself. Survival is refusing to let anyone else define your value. And finally, survival is thriving. I filmed a final reflection video for my channel. I spoke directly to my viewers. Sometimes the people we love hurt us the most. Sometimes family doesn't protect us. Sometimes the world calls us selfish when we protect ourselves. But I promise you this, you are not selfish. You are brave. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to reclaim your story. And if you ever feel trapped by expectation or guilt, remember this, your life belongs to you, and no one else can take that away. Months later, Chloe and I began rebuilding our relationship, not as it was, but as it should be. We spoke openly, honestly. We acknowledged the past. We set rules, boundaries, limitations. No manipulation, no coercion, no weaponizing of emotions. And slowly, trust began to grow. I could forgive, but I would never forget. And that was okay, because survival isn't just living through betrayal. Survival is reclaiming yourself. Survival is refusing to let anyone else define your value. And finally, survival is thriving. I filmed a final reflection video for my channel. I spoke directly to my viewers. Sometimes the people we love hurt us the most. Sometimes family doesn't protect us. Sometimes the world calls us selfish when we protect ourselves. But I promise you this, you are not selfish. You are brave. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to reclaim your story. And if you ever feel trapped by expectation or guilt, remember this, your life belongs to you, and no one else can take that away. Comments poured in. Thank you, I needed this. I feel seen. This changes everything. And I smiled, finally, because I wasn't just surviving. I was free. I was whole. I was me. Years from now, I will remember the word selfish, not as an insult, not as a scar, but as a turning point, a reminder that survival isn't submission, that courage is standing firm, that boundaries are a lifeline, and that reclaiming your story is the most powerful act of all, because life isn't about meeting everyone else's expectations. Life is about living your own, and I finally, completely, unapologetically was.